The horse's hooves threw up clouds of dust as Evelyn Ward galloped into Knights Ferry, California on that scorching afternoon in August 1876. Her dark hair tangled with sweat and dirt, her borrowed dress torn at the hem, and every muscle in her body screaming from 3 days of riding with barely any rest. She had stolen the magnificent black stallion from her husband's stable in Sacramento, and she knew that by now Thomas Ward would have men scouring every trail and town between there and the Nevada border, ready to drag her back to that gilded prison she had called home for 2 miserable years. Knights Ferry sprawled along the Stanislaus River like a collection of weathered bones bleaching in the California sun. The main street was lined with false-fronted buildings that had seen better days, their paint peeling and their wood silvering in the relentless heat. A handful of people moved slowly through the afternoon, seeking whatever shade they could find. Evelyn guided the exhausted horse toward a water trough outside the general store, her hands trembling on the reins as she finally allowed herself to believe she had made it this far. She dismounted carefully, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. The horse drank deeply, and she splashed water on her face, trying to wash away some of the grime and fear. When she looked up, a man was watching her from the covered porch of the building across the street. He wore dusty leather chaps over worn denim, a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a hat pulled low enough to shadow his face. But she could feel the weight of his gaze, measuring and assessing. Evelyn straightened her spine and met his stare. She had not ridden 3 days through the August heat to cower now. The man pushed off from the post he had been leaning against and walked toward her with an easy, confident stride that spoke of someone completely at home in his own skin. As he crossed the street, she could see he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-bronzed skin, and a strong jaw shadowed with several days of stubble. "That is quite a horse," he said, his voice deep and carrying the slight drawl of someone who had spent time in Texas. "Fine bloodlines, not the kind of animal you usually see ridden this hard." Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. He needed the exercise. The man's mouth quirked at one corner, something that might have been amusement or skepticism. "Exercise, that what we are calling it." He walked around the horse, running an experienced hand along the stallion's flank, checking his legs, examining him with the practiced eye of someone who knew horseflesh. "This animal is worth more than most people in this town will see in 5 years of hard work. And judging by the brand on his hip, he belongs to Thomas Ward of Sacramento." The blood drained from Evelyn's face. She took an involuntary step backward, her hand moving to the small pistol she had tucked into her belt beneath her shawl. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Easy," the man said, holding up both hands in a gesture of peace. "I am not looking to cause you trouble. Name is Xander Flynn. I run a ranch about 5 miles north of here, and I make it my business to know who owns what horses in this part of California." His eyes, she could see now, were a startling shade of gray-blue, like storm clouds over the mountains. "Question is, why is a woman riding Thomas Ward's prize stallion into Knights Ferry looking like she has been through hell and back?" Evelyn's fingers tightened on the pistol, but she did not draw it. There was something in this man's face that suggested he was more curious than hostile. "That is my business, Mr. Flynn." "Fair enough," Xander said easily. "But you should know that Ward has a reputation. Mean son of a gun, from what I hear. Treats his horses better than he treats people, and if you stole this animal from him, he will not stop looking until he finds you." He paused, studying her face. "Or until he finds what belongs to him." "I belong to no one," Evelyn said fiercely, and the words came out with more vehemence than she had intended. Understanding dawned in Xander's eyes. "You are his wife. She said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. Xander let out a low whistle and pushed his hat back on his head, revealing sun-lightened brown hair. Well, that complicates things considerably. How long do you figure you have before he catches up? I do not know, Evelyn admitted. A day, perhaps less. I tried to cover my tracks, but I am not skilled at that sort of thing. No, you are not, Xander agreed, and there was no mockery in his voice, just simple statement of fact. You left a trail a blind man could follow. If Ward is as determined as his reputation suggests, his men are probably already asking questions in Oakdale. He was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving from her face to the horse and back again. Then he seemed to come to some decision. All right, here is what is going to happen. You are going to keep that horse. Evelyn blinked at him. What? The horse? You are going to keep him. Fine animal like that, you will need him where you are going. Xander crossed his arms over his chest. But you cannot stay here and you cannot keep running as Evelyn Ward. That woman needs to disappear. If you want to be free of Thomas Ward, you have to leave your old life behind completely. New name, new story, new everything. Why would you help me? Evelyn demanded, suspicious of this sudden generosity from a stranger. You do not know me. You do not know what I might have done. I know Thomas Ward's reputation, Xander said quietly. I know he married a woman half his age 2 years back, some society girl from San Francisco whose family needed money and sold her to the highest bidder. I know that Ward is not a kind man, and I know that look in your eyes. It is the look of someone who would rather die than go back to whatever they are running from. He met her gaze steadily. I also know what it is like to want a fresh start, so I am offering you one, but it has to be complete. No looking back, no regrets, no second thoughts. Can you do that? Evelyn thought of the house in Sacramento with its fine furniture and its cold, echoing rooms. She thought of Thomas Ward's heavy hands and heavier expectations, of the way he had looked at her like she was property he had purchased. She thought of the bruises she had hidden beneath long sleeves and high collars, of the terror that had become her daily companion. Yes, she said, I can do that. Then we need to move fast, Xander said. He glanced up at the sun, calculating. We have maybe 4 hours before dark. Mount up. Where are we going? My ranch. We will get you cleaned up, fed, and rested. Then we need to figure out who you are going to be. He walked to his own horse, a sturdy paint gelding tied nearby, and swung into the saddle with practiced ease. What name do you want? Evelyn hesitated, her hand on the stallion's mane. Choosing a new name felt like cutting the final thread that connected her to her old life. She thought of her mother, dead these 10 years, who had loved roses and poetry and long walks in the evening. Emma, she said finally. Emma, right. Xander nodded. Emma Wright it is. Let us ride, Emma. We have work to do. They left Knights Ferry at a steady pace, not so fast as to draw attention but fast enough to put distance between them and the town. Xander led them along a trail that wound through the foothills, following the river for a while before cutting north through stands of oak and pine. The air cooled as they climbed, and Evelyn breathed deeply, feeling something tight in her chest begin to loosen. How did you come to be married to Thomas Ward? Xander asked after they had been riding for about 30 minutes. His tone was conversational, not prying, and somehow that made it easier to answer. My father had debts, Evelyn said. Gambling debts. Thomas offered to clear them in exchange for my hand in marriage. My father accepted before I knew what was happening. I was 19 years old and had no say in the matter. The words tasted bitter in her mouth. Thomas wanted a young wife to show off to his business associates. Someone pretty and refined who would make him look respectable. He did not want a partner or a companion. He wanted an ornament. And when the ornament did not behave the way he wanted, He tried to reshape me, Evelyn said quietly. With words first, then with his fists. I learned to be very good at making excuses, at hiding things. But 3 days ago, he told me he had made arrangements with one of his associates. He was going to lend me to the man for a weekend, like I was a piece of furniture or a hunting dog. Her voice hardened. That was when I knew I had to leave, no matter the cost. Xander was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with anger barely held in check. Thomas Ward is a coward and a brute. No real man treats a woman that way. No real man treats anyone that way. He looked at her, and there was something fierce in his eyes. You were right to run, Emma, and I give you my word I will do everything in my power to make sure you stay free. The use of her new name sent a strange thrill through her. Emma. Not Evelyn, not Mrs. Ward, just Emma. A new person with a new life stretching out before her like uncharted territory. They rode in companionable silence after that, and Evelyn found herself studying her unexpected ally. Xander Flynn sat his horse like he had been born in the saddle, moving with the animal's rhythm as naturally as breathing. His hands on the reins were strong and capable, scarred from hard work. There was a quiet confidence about him that was nothing like Thomas Ward's bluster and demands for respect. Xander did not need to demand anything. He simply was. The sun was beginning to sink toward the western horizon when they crested a rise, and Evelyn saw the ranch spread out below them. It was not large by California standards, but it was well kept and purposeful. A house built of logs and stone sat in a clearing, with a barn, a corral, and several outbuildings arranged around it. Horses grazed in a fenced pasture, and she could see cattle dotting the hills beyond. It is not much, Xander said, and there was a note of pride in his voice despite his modest words. But it is mine, built it myself over the last 5 years. It is beautiful, Evelyn said honestly. There was something solid and real about the place, something that spoke of permanence and care. They rode down to the ranch, and a man emerged from the barn as they approached. He was older than Xander, perhaps in his 50s, with graying hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent his life outdoors. His eyes narrowed as he took in Evelyn and the stallion. "Company, boss?" he asked, his tone neutral but curious. "Charlie, this is Emma Wright," Xander said, dismounting. "She is going to be staying with us for a while. Emma, this is Charlie Brennan. He has been with me since I started this place, and I trust him with my life." Charlie touched the brim of his hat. "Madam." His gaze flicked to the stallion. "That is some horse. He is hers," Xander said firmly. "No questions, Charlie, not from anyone." Understanding passed between the two men. Charlie nodded slowly. "Understood, I will take care of him, get him rubbed down and fed." "Looks like he has had a hard run." Evelyn dismounted, her legs stiff and aching. "Thank you. His name is Midnight." "Good name for a good horse," Charlie said, taking the reins. He studied Evelyn for a moment, and she saw something like sympathy in his weathered face. "Welcome to the Flynn Ranch, Miss Wright. Any enemy of Thomas Ward is a friend of ours." Evelyn stared at him. "You know, Charlie fought with me in Texas before we came out here," Xander explained. "He knows how to read sign as well as I do, and he has been around long enough to recognize Ward's brand. Like I said, I trust him completely." "Ward is bad news," Charlie said bluntly. "Heard stories about him from a drover who worked on his place for a while. Man treats everyone like dirt, especially women. You were smart to run, and you will be safe here." He led Midnight toward the barn, speaking softly to the tired horse. Xander gestured toward the house. "Come on. You need food and rest. We can figure out the details tomorrow." The interior of the house was simple but comfortable. The main room held a large fireplace, a table with chairs, and a few pieces of well-made furniture. Everything was clean and orderly in a way that suggested Xander took care of his possessions. He led her to a small room off the main area. "This was meant to be a guest room, but I have not had much call for guests," he said. "It is not fancy, but the bed is comfortable and you will have privacy." The room contained a narrow bed, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a trunk for storage. A window looked out over the pastures. To Evelyn, who had slept in satin and silk in Sacramento, it looked like paradise. "It is perfect," she said softly. Xander smiled, and the expression transformed his face, making him look younger and lighting up those storm cloud eyes. "Good. Get yourself washed up if you like. I will put together some food." Evelyn washed her face and hands in the basin, scrubbing away days of dirt and fear. When she emerged from the room, she found Xander laying out bread, cheese, cold meat, and fruit on the table. It was simple fare, but her stomach growled at the sight of it. "Sit," Xander said. "Eat as much as you want. You look like you have not had a proper meal in days." He was right. Evelyn had been too afraid to stop for more than brief rests, eating only what she had been able to grab from the Sacramento house before she fled. Now, with relative safety around her, hunger hit with overwhelming force. She ate steadily, and Xander kept refilling her plate without comment until she finally pushed back from the table, fuller than she had been in weeks. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. I still do not understand why you are helping me, but I am grateful." Xander leaned back in his chair, studying her across the table. "I told you I know what it is like to want a fresh start. That is the truth. I came out here from Texas 5 years ago with nothing but my horse, my skills, and a determination to build something that was mine. No family money, no connections, just hard work and luck. This land, this ranch, it represents everything I have fought for. My freedom, my independence, my right to live life on my own terms." He paused. "When I see someone else fighting for those same things, I cannot help but want to assist." "Were you running from something too?" Evelyn asked quietly. "Not something, someone." Xander's jaw tightened. "My father was a hard man who believed in ruling his family with an iron fist. He had plans for me, plans that did not include my wishes or my dreams. When I told him I wanted to go west, to build my own place, he told me that if I left, I would be dead to him. So I left, and I have been dead to him ever since. I have not spoken to him or any of my family in 5 years." "Do you regret it?" "Not for a single moment," Xander said with quiet certainty. "The life he wanted for me would have killed everything that makes me who I am. Out here I can breathe. I can build, I can be myself without apology." His eyes met hers. "That is what I want for you, Emma. A chance to breathe. A chance to be yourself without fear." The use of her new name, the conviction in his voice, made something warm unfurl in Evelyn's chest. "I do not know who I am without fear," she admitted. "I have been afraid for so long. Afraid of disappointing my father, afraid of Thomas, afraid of what would happen if I tried to leave." "Then I suppose we will have to figure out who you are together," Xander said. "But not tonight. Tonight you need to rest. Tomorrow we will start working on your new life." Evelyn stood, her body aching with exhaustion. "Xander, why did you tell me to keep the horse? Midnight is valuable. He is evidence connecting me to Thomas. Would it not be safer to hide him or send him away?" "Safer for whom?" Xander asked. "That horse represents your courage, Emma. You stole him from a man who terrified you, and you rode him hard toward freedom. Every time you look at him, you will remember that you are brave enough to save yourself. Besides," he added with a slight grin, "I have a feeling that before this is over, you are going to need a fast horse under you." Evelyn wanted to ask what he meant by that, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight. She made her way to the small room, closed the door, and collapsed onto the bed, still fully dressed. Within moments, she was asleep. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon drifting from the main room. For a disoriented moment, she did not know where she was. Then memory returned, and with it came a rush of conflicting emotions. Relief, fear, hope, uncertainty. She rose and straightened her clothing as best she could, then ventured into the main room. Xander was at the stove and Charlie sat at the table nursing a cup of coffee. Both men looked up when she entered. "Morning," Xander said. "How do you feel?" "Like I have been trampled by a herd of cattle," Evelyn admitted, "but better than I did yesterday." "Food will help," Xander said, dishing up a plate of eggs and bacon. "Sit down and eat. Charlie and I have been talking about your situation." Evelyn sat, accepting the plate with murmured thanks. "And what did you conclude?" "That we need to move fast and smart," Charlie said. "Word travels in these parts. If Ward's men come through Knights Ferry asking questions, someone is going to remember seeing a woman on a fine black stallion. They will remember her riding out with Xander. That points them straight here. So what do we do?" Evelyn asked, her appetite disappearing as quickly as it had come. "We make you disappear," Xander said, sitting down across from her. "Not literally, but as Evelyn Ward. As far as anyone knows, Emma Wright has been working here as a cook and housekeeper for the last 6 months. We get you some proper working clothes, teach you how to handle yourself on a ranch, and if anyone comes asking, we have a story that holds together." 6 months, Evelyn said doubtfully. "Will anyone believe that?" "People believe what they want to believe," Charlie said pragmatically. "Most folks around here mind their own business. The ones who do not, well, they will accept what we tell them because Xander has a solid reputation in these parts. He does not lie and he does not cheat. If he says you have been here 6 months, that is good enough." "But what about midnight?" "Even if I change my appearance, someone who knows horses will recognize him." "Already thought of that," Xander said. "Charlie is going to take him up to the high pasture for a while, keep him out of sight. We will tell anyone who asks that he is a horse I bought from a trader passing through. In a few weeks, when things have settled down, we can bring him back." Evelyn pushed her eggs around her plate. "And if Thomas comes here himself, if he looks me in the eye and demands I return with him, then he will learn that California is not Sacramento," Xander said quietly, and there was steel in his voice. "Out here, a man cannot just take what he wants because he claims ownership. Out here, you have friends who will stand with you. You would fight him. Risk your ranch, your reputation, maybe your life, for someone you just met." Xander was silent for a long moment. "My father once told me that a man's worth is measured by what he is willing to fight for. I did not agree with much of what he said, but that part stuck with me. I am willing to fight for the idea that people should be free to choose their own paths. I am willing to fight for the belief that might does not make right. And yes, I am willing to fight for you, Emma Wright, because you deserve the chance to build a life that is yours." Tears stung Evelyn's eyes. She blinked them back, determined not to break down. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." "Do not worry about repayment," Xander said gently. "Just worry about learning to be Emma. Now finish your breakfast. We have a lot of work to do." The next several days passed in a blur of activity. Xander took Evelyn into Knights Ferry and bought her practical clothing. Sturdy skirts and blouses, a split riding skirt, boots meant for work rather than show, a hat to keep the sun off. He introduced her to the shopkeeper as his new housekeeper, and the woman accepted the explanation without question, too busy gossiping about other matters to pay much attention. Back at the ranch, Xander began teaching Evelyn the rhythms of ranch life. She learned to cook simple but hearty meals for working men, to clean and maintain the house without servants, to tend the vegetable garden behind the barn. Charlie showed her how to collect eggs from the chickens and milk the 2 cows that provided dairy for the ranch. But it was Xander who taught her the things that truly began to transform her from Evelyn Ward into Emma Wright. He taught her to ride properly, not the side-saddle posture that society demanded of ladies, but the practical astride position that gave her control and balance. He taught her to handle a rifle, patiently correcting her stance and her aim until she could hit a target more often than not. A woman alone in the West needs to be able to defend herself, he explained as they practiced shooting at targets set up behind the barn. I hope you never need these skills, but if you do, I want you to have them. Evelyn appreciated the lessons for what they were, gifts of independence. Each new skill made her feel more capable, more confident, more like someone who could survive on her own terms. And through it all, she found herself growing increasingly aware of Xander himself. He was patient and kind, but not soft. He pushed her to learn, to grow, to step outside the comfortable boundaries that society had drawn around her. He treated her as an equal, asking her opinions and listening to her ideas as if they mattered. When she struggled with a task, he did not mock her or lose his temper. He simply showed her again, breaking things down into smaller steps until she mastered them. And there was something about the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch. She tried to tell herself it was gratitude, nothing more. But gratitude did not explain the way her heart jumped when he smiled at her, or the way she found herself watching him work, admiring the strength in his shoulders and the competence in his hands. Gratitude did not explain the warmth that spread through her chest when he said her name, or the disappointment she felt each evening when he said goodnight and withdrew to his own room, maintaining a respectful distance. One evening, about a week after her arrival, they sat on the porch after dinner watching the sun set over the hills. Charlie had ridden into town for supplies, and they were alone for the first time in days. The air was cooling, and crickets sang in the grass. "You are learning fast," Xander said, his voice breaking the comfortable silence. "Another few weeks and you will be a genuine ranch woman." "I still cannot rope a fence post, much less a cow," Evelyn pointed out. "That will come. You are not afraid of the work and you are not afraid to fail." "Those are the important things," he paused. "How do you feel? Compared to a week ago," Evelyn considered the question seriously. "Different," she said finally. "Stronger. More myself, if that makes sense. When I look in the mirror now, I see someone I am starting to recognize. Not the girl my father wanted me to be, not the ornament Thomas tried to make me, just me." "Emma," Xander said softly. "Yes, Emma," she smiled. "It is strange how a name can change everything, or maybe it is not the name at all. Maybe it is the life that goes with it." "It is both," Xander said. "The name gives you permission to be someone new, but you do the work of becoming that person. You should be proud of yourself." Evelyn turned to look at him. In the fading light, his profile was strong and serious. "Xander, can I ask you something? Anything? Are you lonely out here?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I have Charlie and I have the ranch, and most days that is enough. But yes, sometimes I am lonely. I miss having someone to share things with, someone to talk to about more than cattle and weather, someone to make plans with." He glanced at her. "Why do you ask?" "Because I was lonely too," Evelyn said quietly. "Even when I was married, even when I was surrounded by people at Thomas's social gatherings, I was desperately lonely. No one saw me. No one knew me. I was just a role I was playing, and I was not even very good at it." "You are good at being yourself," Xander said. "That is what matters." "How do you know?" Evelyn challenged gently. "You have only known me a week. Maybe I am a terrible person." Maybe I am selfish and shallow and not worth the trouble you have gone to." Xander turned to face her fully. "You rode 3 days on a stolen horse to escape a situation that was killing you slowly. You chose uncertainty and danger over safety and comfort because you refused to let someone break who you are. You have worked hard every day to learn new skills and build a new life, and you have not complained once. You have courage and determination and a good heart. That is how I know." The intensity in his voice, in his eyes, made Evelyn's breath catch. They were sitting close together on the porch, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray-blue eyes. "Xander," she whispered, not even sure what she was asking for. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, gentle and questioning. "Emma, I need you to know something. I am helping you because it is the right thing to do, but I would be lying if I said that was the only reason anymore." "What is the other reason?" Evelyn asked, though she thought she knew. "Because somewhere in the last week I started to care about you," Xander said honestly. "Not as someone I am obligated to protect, but as a person, as a woman, as someone I want to know better, want to spend time with, want to." He trailed off, shaking his head. "But the timing is terrible, and you have just escaped one situation where a man had power over you. The last thing I want is for you to feel pressured or obligated." "You are nothing like Thomas," Evelyn said fiercely. "Nothing. Thomas took what he wanted without asking, without caring. You are asking. You are giving me a choice. Do you have any idea how rare that is, how precious?" "You still have that choice," Xander said, "and I will respect whatever you decide. If you want me to step back to maintain distance, I will do that. Your safety and your freedom are more important than my feelings." Evelyn thought about everything that had happened, about the week of learning and growing and slowly becoming someone new. She thought about the way Xander had treated her with respect and kindness, the way he had pushed her to be stronger without ever making her feel weak. She thought about the warmth in his eyes and the gentleness in his hands, and she thought about the way her heart had started to beat faster every time he was near. "I do not want you to step back," she said quietly. I want to see where this goes. I want to know you better too. But Xander, I need you to understand something. I'm not whole yet. I am still healing from what Thomas did to me. I am still learning who I am. I cannot promise you anything beyond this moment." "This moment is enough," Xander said. He smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "We will take it slow. We will figure it out together. No promises, no expectations, just two people getting to know each other. Is that all right?" "That is perfect," Evelyn said, and meant it. The sound of hoofbeats broke the spell between them. They pulled apart as Charlie rode into the yard, his saddlebags bulging with supplies from town. But as Evelyn stood and went to help unload, she caught Xander's eye and saw the promise there. This was not over. It was just beginning. The next 2 weeks passed in a haze of work and quiet moments stolen between chores. Xander and Evelyn fell into an easy rhythm, their conversations growing deeper and more personal. He told her about his childhood in Texas, about the father who had wanted to control every aspect of his life, about the moment he had decided to walk away from everything familiar in search of something true. She told him about her mother's death, about the loneliness of her childhood with a father who saw her only as an asset, about the slow crushing of her spirit during her marriage to Thomas Ward. But they also talked about happier things. Xander described his dreams for the ranch, his plans to expand the herd and maybe add some better breeding stock. Evelyn discovered a passion for the vegetable garden, planning improvements and experimenting with different crops. They argued good-naturedly about books, discovering a shared love of adventure stories and a complete disagreement about poetry. They laughed together over small mishaps and celebrated small victories, and slowly, carefully, they grew closer. A touch that lingered a moment longer than necessary. A look that communicated more than words, sitting together in the evening with their shoulders pressed close. Small intimacies that built trust and kindled something deeper. Charlie watched it all with knowing eyes but said nothing. He seemed pleased, Evelyn thought, to see his boss happy. The older man treated her with avuncular affection, teasing her gently about her cooking experiments and praising her progress with the horses. It was Charlie who brought the news that shattered their fragile peace. He rode in one afternoon, his face grim, and called Xander aside for a quiet conversation. Evelyn watched from the garden, her stomach twisting with sudden anxiety. When Xander approached her a few minutes later, she knew before he spoke that her borrowed time had run out. "Thomas Ward is in Knights Ferry," Xander said without preamble. "He arrived this morning with 3 men. They are asking about a woman on a black stallion." The color drained from Evelyn's face. "Did anyone tell him about me?" "Not yet. Charlie heard about it from the blacksmith, who is a friend." "But Emma, it is only a matter of time. Someone will remember seeing you arrive with me. Ward will come here." "Then I need to run again," Evelyn said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I will take midnight and head for Nevada. You can tell Thomas you have not seen me." "No." Xander's voice was flat and uncompromising. "You are not running again. You have done nothing wrong, and I will not let him chase you across the West like a criminal. But if he comes here, if he sees me, if he comes here, he will learn that you are under my protection," Xander said. "California is not Sacramento, Emma. Out here, a marriage does not give a man absolute power over his wife. Out here, your word matters as much as his." "You do not understand," Evelyn said desperately. "Thomas is wealthy and connected. He can make trouble for you, ruin your reputation, maybe even bring legal action." "Let him try," Xander said grimly. "I am not afraid of Thomas Ward." "But I am," Evelyn whispered. "Xander, I am terrified when I think about seeing him again, about him touching me." She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. Xander pulled her into his embrace, his arms strong and warm around her. "Listen to me. You are not alone anymore. You have me, and you have Charlie, and you have the truth on your side. Ward cannot just take you. He has no legal standing to force you to go with him. The law in California recognizes a woman's right to leave an abusive marriage." "Does it?" Evelyn asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "Really, really, I made a point of finding out." Xander pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "Emma, you have rights. You have choices. And you have people who will stand with you. You just have to be brave enough to stand your ground." Evelyn thought about the woman she had been 3 weeks ago, terrified and desperate, fleeing in the night. Then she thought about the woman she had become, the woman who could ride and shoot and work with her own hands, the woman who had started to believe she deserved happiness. "All right," she said, straightening her spine. "I will stand. But Xander, I need to ask you something. Why are you doing this? You said you cared about me, but this goes beyond caring. This could cost you everything." Xander cupped her face in his hands, his thumb stroking gently across her cheek. "Because somewhere in the last 3 weeks, caring became something deeper. I am falling in love with you, Emma Wright. I know the timing is impossible and the situation is complicated, but that does not make it less true. And because I love you, I will fight for your right to be free. Not free to be with me necessarily, just free to choose your own life." Tears spilled down Evelyn's cheeks. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I did not think I could feel this way, not after Thomas, but you make me feel safe and seen and valued. You make me feel like I matter." "You do matter," Xander said fiercely. "You matter more than anything." He kissed her then, gentle and questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Evelyn did not pull away. She leaned into the kiss, into him, tasting hope and promise and the future she was starting to believe in. His lips were warm and careful against hers, the kiss communicating everything words could not express. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Charlie cleared his throat diplomatically from several yards away. "Hate to interrupt, but we should probably make plans. Ward is not going to wait forever." They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Charlie rode to town to alert the sheriff, a reasonable man who knew Xander and respected his honesty. Xander brought Midnight down from the high pasture, wanting the horse nearby in case they needed to move quickly. Evelyn forced herself to eat and rest, knowing she would need her strength for what was coming. Thomas Ward arrived the next morning. Evelyn heard the hoofbeats and looked out the window to see 4 riders approaching. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized the man in the lead. Thomas Ward sat his horse like he owned the world, his bulky frame dressed in expensive clothes, his florid face set in lines of anger and determination. The 3 men with him looked hard and mean, hired muscle brought along to intimidate. Xander stepped onto the porch and Evelyn moved to stand beside him. She felt his hand close around hers, warm and steady, giving her strength. "Stay calm," he murmured. "Remember, he has no power here unless you give it to him." Thomas Ward reined in his horse and stared at Evelyn, his eyes narrowing. "Evelyn, so this is where you have been hiding." "I am not hiding," Evelyn said, forcing her voice to stay level. "I am living my life, living your life." Thomas's voice rose. "You are my wife. You stole my property and ran away like a common criminal. I have every right to take you back to Sacramento and see you punished for your crimes." "She is not your property," Xander said coolly, "and she is not going anywhere she does not choose to go." Thomas finally seemed to notice Xander. He looked him up and down with contempt. "And who are you to interfere between a man and his wife? My name is Xander Flynn. This is my ranch, and Emma Wright is under my protection." "Emma Wright?" Thomas laughed harshly. "Is that what she is calling herself now?" "Her name is Evelyn Ward, and she is coming with me." "No," Evelyn said, and the word came out stronger than she had expected. "I am not. Thomas, our marriage is over. I will not come back to Sacramento. I will not live in fear anymore. I want a divorce." Thomas's face turned purple. "A divorce? You ungrateful little witch. I gave you everything. A fine home, beautiful clothes, a position in society. And this is how you repay me? By running off with some dirt farmer and demanding a divorce. You gave me nothing I wanted," Evelyn said, her fear transforming into anger. "You gave me a prison and called it a home. You gave me bruises and called it discipline. You tried to lend me to your business associate like I was a piece of furniture. You are a cruel, vicious man, Thomas, and I would rather die than go back to you." "You do not have a choice," Thomas snarled. He gestured to his men. "Take her, and if this cowboy tries to interfere, teach him some manners." The 3 hired men dismounted and started toward the porch. Xander's hand moved to the gun at his hip, but before he could draw, Charlie emerged from the barn with a rifle, and the sheriff rode into the yard from the other direction. "That is far enough," the sheriff called. His hand rested on his own weapon. "Mr. Ward, I am Sheriff Daniels. I have been made aware of the situation here, and I am here to tell you that you have no authority to take this woman by force." Thomas turned his glare on the sheriff. "She is my wife. She is a woman who has left an abusive marriage and requested protection," Sheriff Daniels said calmly. "Under California law, she has the right to do that. If you have grievances about property, you can file a civil suit, but you cannot lay hands on her without her consent." "This is outrageous," Thomas blustered. "I know people, important people. I will have your badge for this." "You are welcome to try," the sheriff said, unmoved. "But right now, you need to get back on your horse and leave this ranch. If you do not, I will arrest you for attempted assault." Thomas looked from the sheriff to Xander to Charlie, all of whom stood ready to defend Evelyn. His face twisted with rage and frustration. "This is not over," he spat at Evelyn. "You think you can humiliate me this way? You think you can run off with your lover and live happily ever after? I will ruin you. I will make sure everyone knows what you are, a thief and an adulteress." "I do not care what you tell people," Evelyn said, and realized it was true. "Your opinion means nothing to me, Thomas. You cannot hurt me anymore." For a moment, she thought he would try to rush the porch despite the guns pointed in his direction. His hands clenched into fists and his whole body trembled with fury. But he was ultimately a coward, and he knew he was outmatched. "You will regret this," he said, his voice low and vicious. "All of you." He wheeled his horse around and spurred it viciously, galloping out of the yard with his men scrambling to follow. Evelyn's legs gave out, and she sat down hard on the porch steps. Xander was beside her in an instant, his arm around her shoulders. "You did it," he said softly. "You stood up to him." "We did it," Evelyn corrected, leaning into his warmth. "I could not have done it alone." Sheriff Daniels dismounted and approached the porch. "Miss, I think you should know that what Ward said about a civil suit is true. He could try to claim damages for the horse or other property. It would be his word against yours." "Actually, it would not," Xander said. He looked at Evelyn. "How would you feel about making our arrangement more permanent?" Evelyn stared at him. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that if we were married, Thomas Ward would have no claim on you at all. Your marriage to him would be void, and as my wife, you would have the full protection of my name and my standing in this community." He paused. "I know this is fast, and I know it is not romantic. If you want to wait to do this properly, I understand. But from a practical standpoint, it makes perfect sense," Evelyn said slowly. "But Xander, marriage is not something to be entered into just for practical reasons. I did that once before, and I swore I would never do it again unless it was for love." "Then let it be for love," Xander said simply. "Because I do love you, Emma. I have loved you since you stood on this porch and told Thomas Ward he could not hurt you anymore. I have loved you since the first moment you smiled at me over dinner. I have loved you probably since you rode into Knights Ferry on that stolen horse with fire in your eyes." He took her hands in his. "Marry me, not because it is practical, though it is. Not because it will protect you, though it will. Marry me because I want to spend the rest of my life with you, because I want to build something real and true with you, because I cannot imagine my future without you in it." Evelyn felt tears streaming down her face again, but they were good tears this time, tears of joy and hope. "Are you sure? You have only known me a few weeks. What if I am not who you think I am? What if you are exactly who I think you are?" Xander interrupted gently. "What if you are strong and brave and kind, and everything I have been looking for without knowing I was looking? What if we have a chance at something rare and precious, and the only question is whether we are brave enough to take it?" Evelyn thought about the woman she had been when she rode into Knights Ferry, desperate and afraid. She thought about the woman she was becoming, the woman who could stand up to Thomas Ward and mean it when she said he could not hurt her anymore. She thought about Xander, about his patience and his kindness, and the way he had given her the freedom to choose her own path. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you, not because it is practical, though I am grateful for the protection. I will marry you because I love you too, because you make me want to be brave, because when I imagine my future now, you are in every moment of it." Xander pulled her into his arms and kissed her, deep and passionate, not caring that Sheriff Daniels and Charlie were watching. When they finally broke apart, both of them were laughing through tears. "Well, I will be," Charlie said, grinning broadly. "About damn time." Sheriff Daniels chuckled. "Congratulations. When is the wedding?" "As soon as possible," Xander said, looking at Evelyn. "If that is all right with you." "The sooner the better," Evelyn agreed. "I want to be Emma Flynn, not Evelyn Ward, as quickly as the law allows." "I can perform the ceremony myself if you like," Sheriff Daniels offered. "I am authorized to officiate marriages. We could do it today if you have witnesses." "Today," Evelyn repeated and laughed at the absurdity and the rightness of it. "I ran away from one husband 3 weeks ago, and now I am marrying another man today. It sounds insane." "It sounds like freedom," Xander said. "The freedom to choose. That is all that matters." And so they were married that afternoon, standing in the yard of the Flynn ranch with the California sun beating down and the smell of pine and earth all around them. Evelyn wore a simple blue dress that Xander had bought her in town, and she held a bouquet of wildflowers that Charlie had picked from the hillside. Xander wore his best shirt and pants, his hair still damp from washing, his eyes bright with happiness. Sheriff Daniels said the words, and they repeated them, their voices steady and sure. Charlie stood witness, beaming like a proud father. And when the sheriff pronounced them husband and wife, Xander kissed Emma with such tenderness and joy that she felt her heart might burst from the fullness of it. "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Flynn," Xander murmured against her lips. "Thank you for giving it to me," Emma whispered back. They celebrated with a simple dinner that Charlie prepared, and later Emma and Xander sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, their fingers intertwined. "Are you frightened?" Xander asked quietly. "About tonight?" Emma understood what he was asking. Her wedding night with Thomas had been brutal and humiliating, an experience that had left her terrified of physical intimacy. "A little," she admitted. "Not of you, just of the memories." "Then we will make new memories," Xander said. "And we will go at your pace, Emma, always at your pace." "I will never take what you are not ready to give." "Do you believe me?" "I do," Emma said, and realized it was completely true. "I trust you, Xander." He stood and held out his hand. "Come to bed, wife. Let me show you what it is supposed to be like between two people who love each other." Emma took his hand and let him lead her inside, to the room they would now share. And in the gentle darkness, with infinite patience and tenderness, Xander Flynn erased years of fear and pain, replacing them with new memories of pleasure and connection and love given freely. Much later, as Emma lay in her husband's arms feeling safe and cherished and more herself than she had ever been, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The desperate flight from Sacramento, the stolen horse, the cowboy who had told her to keep it but leave her old life behind. She had left it behind. Evelyn Ward was gone, dissolved like smoke in the wind. In her place was Emma Flynn, a woman who was still learning who she could be, but who knew without doubt that she was loved and valued and free. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Xander asked sleepily, his arms tightening around her. "For seeing me, for helping me become who I am meant to be." "You did that yourself," Xander said. "I just provided a safe place for it to happen, but you are welcome anyway." Emma smiled and closed her eyes, drifting into sleep with the sound of her husband's heartbeat steady beneath her ear. The next weeks brought a flurry of activity as Emma and Xander began building their life together. Emma threw herself into learning every aspect of running the ranch, determined to be a true partner rather than just a wife. She learned to help with the cattle, to mend fences, to handle the business side of ranch management. Xander taught her everything he knew, treating her as an equal and valuing her input. They also worked to make the house more of a home. Emma used some of Xander's savings to order fabric and supplies from town, sewing curtains for the windows and cushions for the chairs. She planted flowers around the house, wanting beauty as well as function. Xander built her a bookshelf and made a trip to Sacramento to purchase books, carefully avoiding any chance of running into Thomas Ward. Word spread through Knights Ferry and the surrounding area about the marriage. Most people accepted the story that Emma had been working at the Flynn ranch for months before the wedding, and those who did not kept their suspicions to themselves. Thomas Ward sent a few hostile letters threatening legal action, but nothing ever came of it. Eventually, the letters stopped altogether. Charlie moved into the bunkhouse to give the newlyweds privacy, though he still took his meals with them and worked alongside them daily. He became the older brother Emma had never had, protective and affectionate, always ready with advice or a terrible joke to make her laugh. 6 months after the wedding, Emma discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified at first, her memories of Thomas Ward making her fear what pregnancy and motherhood might mean. But Xander was overjoyed, and his happiness gradually eased her fears. "Our child will grow up knowing love and freedom," he told her, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "That is what we will give them, the right to be whoever they are meant to be." Their son was born on a crisp morning in October 1877, squalling and red-faced and perfect. They named him Samuel, after Xander's grandfather, the one member of his family who had understood his need for independence. Charlie became Uncle Charlie, doting on the baby with surprising tenderness for such a rough man. Emma discovered that motherhood suited her. She loved the weight of her son in her arms, loved watching Xander hold him with such careful reverence, loved seeing the tiny personality begin to emerge. Samuel was a happy baby, quick to smile and curious about everything. As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Xander's careful management and Emma's sharp business sense combined to make the Flynn Ranch one of the most successful small operations in the area. They added more cattle, improved their breeding stock, and began to gain a reputation for quality. Emma sometimes thought about her old life, about the woman she had been in Sacramento. It seemed like a different person, someone she had read about in a book, rather than someone she had been. The fear that had been her constant companion for 2 years was gone, replaced by confidence and contentment. When Samuel was 2 years old, Emma gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, after Emma's mother. She had her father's gray-blue eyes and her mother's dark hair, and from the beginning she had a fierce independence that made both parents laugh. "She is going to be a handful," Xander predicted, watching his daughter refuse to stay in her cradle, demanding to be held. "Good," Emma said, smiling. "The world needs more women who know what they want and are not afraid to demand it." The years rolled by, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of a growing family. Samuel learned to ride almost before he could walk, sitting in front of his father on horseback and absorbing everything Xander could teach him. Rose proved to be as stubborn and determined as her mother, refusing to be left behind or treated as lesser because she was a girl. Midnight lived to a ripe old age, retired from hard work but still kept in the pasture near the house. Emma visited him often, bringing him apples and carrots, remembering the desperate ride that had brought her to this life. When he finally died peacefully one winter night, Xander buried him on the hill overlooking the ranch and carved a simple marker. Emma stood at the grave and silently thanked the horse that had carried her to freedom. Charlie grew grayer and slower, but he refused to stop working. "I will rest when I am dead," he said when Xander suggested he take it easier. He lived to see both Flynn children grow into capable young adults, and when he finally passed in his sleep at the age of 73, They buried him next to midnight, knowing he would have appreciated the company. Emma heard occasional news of Thomas Ward over the years. He had remarried, divorced, lost his fortune in bad investments, and died bitter and alone in 1895. When Emma learned of his death, she felt nothing but pity for the man who had tried to cage her spirit. He had spent his life trying to control others, and in the end, he had died with nothing. Samuel grew into a fine young man, steady and responsible like his father, with his mother's sharp mind for business. He married a teacher from Knights Ferry, a smart woman named Catherine who fit seamlessly into the Flynn family. Rose, true to her nature, decided she wanted to study law, scandalizing some of the more conservative members of the community. Emma and Xander supported her wholeheartedly, using their savings to send her to university in San Francisco. On a warm evening in 1910, Emma and Xander sat on the same porch where they had first admitted their feelings for each other, 34 years earlier. They were both in their 50s now, grayed and weathered but still strong. Samuel and Catherine lived in a house they had built on the north edge of the ranch property, raising their own children. Rose was establishing herself as one of the few female attorneys in California, fighting for women's rights and making her parents proud. "You ever regret it?" Xander asked, taking Emma's hand in his. "Leaving your old life, taking such a risk?" Emma looked at the ranch spread out before them, at the home they had built together, at the legacy they were leaving for their children and grandchildren. She thought about the terrified woman who had ridden into Knights Ferry on a stolen horse, and the strong, confident woman she had become. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "You gave me everything, Xander, freedom, love, a real life. You told me to keep the horse but leave my old life behind, and it was the best advice anyone ever gave me." "You gave me everything too," Xander said softly. "A partner, a family. Someone to build dreams with. I was content before you came, but I was not complete. You made me whole, Emma Flynn." "Emma Flynn," Emma repeated, savoring the name that had been hers for more than 3 decades. "Do you know, I can barely remember being Evelyn Ward." "It is like that person never really existed, or existed only in a bad dream." "She existed," Xander said. "She existed long enough to be brave enough to save herself, and I will always be grateful to her for that, because without her, I would never have found you." Emma leaned her head on her husband's shoulder, feeling the same sense of peace and rightness that had filled her since the day they married. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set and the stars emerged, two people who had found each other against the odds and built something lasting and true. "Tell me again," Emma said softly. "About the day I arrived." Xander smiled. He had told this story many times over the years to their children and grandchildren, but he never tired of it. "You rode into town on a stolen horse," he began. "The finest black stallion I had ever seen. You were covered in dust and running from a life that was killing you. And I took one look at you and knew that you were the bravest person I had ever met. You told me to keep the horse," Emma continued, picking up the familiar thread of the story. "I told you to keep the horse but leave your old life behind," Xander agreed. "Because I knew that horse represented your courage, and I knew that you needed to become someone new, someone free." "And I did," Emma said. "I became Emma Flynn, wife of Xander Flynn, mother of Samuel and Rose, rancher and partner and friend. I became exactly who I was always meant to be." "Yes, you did," Xander said, kissing the top of her head. "And I have loved every moment of the journey." They sat together as the darkness deepened, two people who had found love in unexpected circumstances and nurtured it into something that would last beyond their lifetimes. Behind them, the house they had built together stood solid and welcoming. Around them, the ranch they had created thrived. And ahead of them, whatever years remained were guaranteed to be filled with love and partnership, and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. Emma thought about all the women who were still trapped in situations like the one she had escaped, women who did not have the courage or the opportunity or the resources to flee. She thought about the changes slowly happening in the world, the growing recognition that women were people with rights and choices. She thought about Rose, fighting for those rights in courtrooms, and felt fierce pride. "The world is changing," she said to Xander. "Women are getting the right to vote, the right to own property, the right to leave bad marriages without being treated as criminals. Do you think it will be better for our grandchildren?" "I think it will be better because of people like you and Rose who refuse to accept injustice," Xander said. "You changed your own world, Emma, and in doing so, you helped change the world for others. That is worth celebrating." Emma smiled in the darkness. "Do you remember when you said that a man's worth is measured by what he is willing to fight for?" "I remember." "A woman's worth is measured the same way," Emma said. "And I fought for my freedom, for my right to choose my own life, for my children's right to grow up in a home filled with love instead of fear. I am proud of that fight, Xander. I am proud of who I became because of it." "You should be," Xander said warmly. "I am proud of you too. I have been proud of you every day since you walked into my life." As the night deepened around them, Emma felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. She was grateful for her courage in fleeing Sacramento, grateful for the stolen horse that had carried her to safety, grateful for the cowboy who had seen her worth and offered her protection, grateful for the love that had grown between them, unexpected and precious, grateful for the family they had created and the legacy they were leaving. "I love you," she said to Xander, the words as true and powerful as they had been the day she first spoke them. "I love you too," Xander replied. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after that until the end of time." They sat together under the stars, two people who had chosen each other and chosen freedom, two people who had built a life worth living. And if Emma's thoughts drifted sometimes to the desperate woman who had ridden into Knights Ferry so many years ago, it was only to silently thank her for being brave enough to steal a horse and ride toward an uncertain future. Because that uncertain future had become a beautiful present, and Emma Flynn would not change a single moment of it.